is SLAYsmr, an ASMR channel where I talk about a horror movie that I love every week. We're brand new, and I kicked it off last week with my favorite horror movie and my favorite film of all time, Halloween. I want to thank everyone who's coming back, who watched that installment and is back for more. It's been great interacting with you all online over the past week and just hearing what you have to say and what brought you to the channel. And if you're new here, if this is your first time, which might be most of you because I only have like 2 episodes at this point, thank you for coming as well. This is just something that's really fun for me to do right now. I love ASMR, I love horror movies, I love combining the two, and hopefully this channel provides some kind of relaxation for you during whatever this is that we're in right now. Also, so last week in my little introduction to the channel, I talked about why I find horror movies comforting. Right? I didn't really answer that. I just kind of thought I posed it as a question because I've always wondered that about myself. Why are horror movies comforting to me? Why do so many people find joy and comfort in things that are really scary? And I realized there's an entire podcast about that. It's called Psychoanalysis, and it has my friends Lara Unerstal and Jen Adams and some other folks sometimes on it too. I just want to give them a quick shout out and a plug because I feel like their podcast is an eternal quest for that answer to that question, and they get way more in depth about it and are probably a little bit smarter about it than I am. I'm pretty much here just telling you about a movie I love and why I love it, and sharing some memories of it. So yeah. Okay, so that's a much shorter introduction than last week. Oh, actually, one more thing. I'm sorry, I did remember one more thing. You may notice the setup is a little bit different this week. Instead of filming right on my computer, I actually mounted my phone on a tripod. I think it looks better. I don't know. We're not getting like quite as tight of a frame on me. That might be a good thing. That might be a bad thing. I don't know. I'm still very new to this. I'm testing out different ways of doing it. So if you have any feedback, positive or negative, about the 2 different looks, feel free to comment on that in the comment section. Also, so behind me, I have my little Michael Myers and my little Laurie Strode again, and old Uncle Steve King. Not Steve King. I don't want to say that. Stephen King. Uncle Stephen King. In the picture there, he's not really my uncle. It'd be cool if he was, but he's not. Yeah. So I have the Halloween figures up. We're not talking about Halloween this week. We are going to be talking about 1996's Scream. I used to have a Ghostface action figure from Todd McFarlane, the Movie Maniac series. Probably came out a few years after the actual first film did. I must have sold it. I thought I still had it. I was gonna put it right there and maybe put its little stand over there with the poster. Sort of a rotating thematic thing every week behind me, but I look through my boxes of toys. Yes, I still have some toys, even though I'm a 36-year-old man. I don't play with them, I just have them. I looked through the box, I couldn't find it anywhere, so I must have sold it or given it away at some point. I kind of wish I hadn't. It would be really cool to have Ghostface back there right now. And I found a bunch of other Movie Maniacs, just not that one, so I'm not sure where it is, so I don't have any Scream memorabilia. I don't have the movie on DVD or Blu-ray or VHS or anything like that. I would say the closest thing I have to being a piece of appropriate Scream merchandise is I have a bunch of Ghostface Killer CDs. He's not named after Scream, he was around before Scream, but his name is Ghostface. I don't know. Maybe that's some kind of connection. Maybe not. I don't know. So yeah, I just kept the Michael Myers and Laurie Strode figures from Halloween up there. But then I thought about it, and that actually is very appropriate because Scream as a film is very much in conversation with the film Halloween. We see footage of the film Halloween in it. We actually hear music cues from the film Halloween in it. Halloween gets referenced a bunch. I was reading that screenwriter Kevin Williamson actually used Halloween as his kind of blueprint in a way, and was so inspired by it, and like many of us horror fans, was obsessed with it. So I figured, alright, let's leave the Halloween figures up. They have a lot to do with Scream. I chose Scream because although Halloween is my favorite horror movie, and I saw it before Scream, it came out in the 70s. It came out in 1978. I was born in 1984. When Scream came out, I was 12 years old in 1996. And Scream was the first horror movie that felt like a horror movie made for my generation. I saw it in theaters. The characters were not that much older than me. I mean, they were being played by people who are much older than me, but they were teenagers. I was about to go into high school. So I felt like the film spoke to me. And of course, even all the metafictional references. I mean, they reference everything from famous horror movies like Halloween and Friday the 13th and A Nightmare on Elm Street. And it's directed by Nightmare on Elm Street's director Wes Craven. To films that, at least at the time, were maybe a little bit more obscure, like I Spit on Your Grave, Terror Train, even The Fog, which, I mean, it's not exactly a cult movie, but I don't think it has I don't think at that time it had the iconic status that Nightmare and Friday and Halloween did. My point of all this is that as a kid who grew up liking horror movies, seeing a horror movie that referenced so many other horror movies, and not only referenced them, but folded them into the plot and commented on them, recognized the rules inherent in those movies, only so it could break the rules, and then also play by the rules sometimes too. I had never seen a horror movie that felt like it was that indebted to other horror movies, and as a result, this sounds so silly, but I think as a kid I really felt seen, you know? Not that I was some marginalized kid who had a bad upbringing or even that hard of a time in school. If I'm being honest, I liked my childhood a lot, but you know, back in the day, watching horror movies wasn't considered cool. I don't know, is it considered cool now? I'm not sure. I feel like it's maybe a little bit more in vogue than it was when I was growing up. But anyway, back then it wasn't cool to read Stephen King. It wasn't cool to watch zombie movies. It wasn't cool to read comic books. And so to see a film come out and be wildly successful to the point where it reinvigorated an entire genre, and see the people in the movie speaking to people who love those kind of movies and just using the same language and the same reference points, that was so cool to me as a kid. I will say, I think more often than not, in the Scream series, those points are often used for a source of comedy, right? It's, when Randy, the character Randy, played by Jamie Kennedy, is talking about the different horror movie rules, I think that's supposed to be funny, as are a lot of the references in the film. And although I understood the references, and I kind of understood how they were maybe subverting the genre a little bit, I don't think as a kid I got that they were supposed to be funny. Like I was in on the joke without realizing it was a joke, if that makes sense. And I think that's just because I was so excited to see a horror movie that I loved in theaters that I just looked at it as a really smart horror movie rather than a horror comedy. And that's kind of the beauty of Scream, isn't it? It really does work as well as a satire, as well as it does as a slasher film. It's really gory. It's really scary. So yeah, as a kid, although I understood the references, for me, I would say the scares were like 70%, and the satire was maybe 30%, whereas rewatching it as an adult, that formula's gotten reversed a little bit. When I think about that first kill, I mean, the movie just drops you into it. Something I think about a lot when I watch scary movies is just the pacing of them. Some of my favorite horror movies are, in my opinion, very slowly paced, sometimes to their detriment. And when I think about the ones that, I mean, really take it to the stratosphere to me, like Halloween, Scream, they just kind of drop you in on the action. I mean, as soon as the movie starts, there aren't even opening credits. you see the title scream after the first kill, but that's it. And I think even that felt new and unconventional to me at the time, to see a movie that didn't have credits, opening credits anyway. It just drops you right into it. Drew Barrymore as Casey Becker. She is at home making popcorn, ready to watch a scary movie. The phone rings before she does anything in the movie, and of course it's the killer, or killers rather. And like I said, just drops you right into it. As soon as she picks up, we have a little bit of build up, a little bit of her, the killer trying to flirt with her a little bit, and it soon becomes very clear that this is not just a prank phone call. This has really horrible intent behind it, really murderous intent, and you're off to the races. And you see these two just insanely gory kills, right at the top. And so right away there's momentum, and then the film just does not let up until the very end. And of course it transforms more from a slasher to kind of a whodunit by the end, complete with the killers giving their big explanations and all that. But I love it. I just think the film has such speed and such energy right at the top. And I know it seems quaint at this point when you have things like Game of Thrones and The Shield, pieces of pop culture where killing off a big name character early on it almost feels a little passé now. It feels like a worn out trick, in my opinion. But when Scream came out, especially in horror movies, that was a new thing. I mean, I think when I saw the movie as a kid, the only actors who I even recognized were Drew Barrymore, who I knew from E.T. and whatever else, and Firestarter, of course. And then I don't know actually if I saw any of her movies as when she was a grown up. I think I knew her more from when she was a little kid. I knew who Drew Barrymore was, and I knew who Courtney Cox was from Friends, of course, and Henry Winkler from Happy Days. I don't even think I knew who Neve Campbell was. I hadn't watched The Craft at that point. Was she on Party of Five yet? I had never watched Party of Five. My point for all this is that you don't expect to see a movie like that and then see the only person you recognize in the film get killed within the first 5 minutes, nonetheless. I don't know if it's 5 minutes, but it's short. And then to see her on the poster and everything like that, it felt like a really bold move. So yeah, I think that just energizes the movie right off the bat. I feel like I've talked a lot just about the prelude of the movie. If we want to run down some of the horror references, I got a kick as a kid seeing Wes Craven as a cameo, playing a janitor. Looks very much like Freddy Krueger and is named Fred. Like I said, I loved all the Halloween references in it. Toward the climax of the movie, in the third act, all the characters are gathered at what ends up being one of the killer's houses, because school is canceled because of the murders going on, and they're watching Halloween, the film Halloween, and the film nerd in the movie, Randy, played by Jamie Kennedy, he's laying out the rules, and so once again, seeing that was really cool. But beyond that, even in the first few minutes, there's a ton of Halloween references. When Casey Becker's parents come home to find her missing, they call the Mackenzies, which is the family at the end of Halloween that Laurie Strode tells the kids to call. She says, go down the street to the Mackenzie's house. So that felt like a deep cut at the time. And then when the killer on the phone is quizzing Casey about the different horror movies, one of them is Halloween, and you hear just a slight tinge of John Carpenter's Halloween theme in the background, which I thought was really cool. And I mentioned last week how whenever I hear that song in headphones or in a movie or at high school gym or wherever else, I always think Michael Myers is just gonna pop out. So seeing that happen before we see the actual killer in Scream right away scared me. We should talk about the killers a little bit. Ghostface, as I'm sure you're all aware, wears just black robes, almost like a Grim Reaper robe, has a hunting knife and a cheap dime store mask is modeled after Edward Munch's painting, The Scream. Am I saying that right? Munch? It's German, I think. I could be wrong. Anyway, the painting where the guy's like, I look like Macaulay Culkin when I'm doing that, but you know what I'm saying. The painting of the guy doing that. I think that mask is based off of that. Kind of an elongated version of that painting. It's very simple. It's very cheap, and I had actually seen that exact costume several times in a row on different Halloweens in my childhood before Scream came out. That's another way I think it spoke to my generation. This wasn't some elaborate, crazy costume created for this killer. This was using a costume that people my age had all seen people wear in real life. We maybe even, some of us wore it ourselves in real life. And something I remember is that in Scream, it's a white mask, but in real life it came in different variants. There was an orange version of it, there was a green version, there was a dark purple version, and I think some of them glowed in the dark. The white one maybe even glowed in the dark, I'm not sure. But yeah, it was really freaky to see a costume that you had seen in real life pop onto the screen like that and be utilized once again. I really felt like my generation was being seen with that movie. Not to say that the high schoolers in it talk exactly like high schoolers did. I think when you get Kevin Williamson, you always get that kind of sometimes overly witty, cerebral dialogue, which is fine. It's a stylistic choice. I feel like he's very much operating in his own world. I think it works a lot better in a movie like Scream that actually is smart, as opposed to a movie like I Know What You Did Last Summer, which I'd argue is not quite as smart, although I love that movie, and I'll probably do an episode on it at some point. I have a lot of affinity for that movie as well. But yeah, so even though it wasn't necessarily a very accurate depiction of high school, it was at least an accurate depiction of maybe how high schoolers looked at horror and grew up on horror in many ways. And once again, you have a lot of actors. I don't know how exactly old they all were, but they definitely weren't 16, 17, 18, however old they're supposed to be in the movie. So after I saw Scream, some friends and I got so obsessed with the movie that we wanted to start making our own horror movies as 12-year-olds before phones. And, you know, like I said, I'm 36 now, so I feel like it would be much easier for us to make a movie like Scream nowadays than back when we were 12. We had to use just like a Super 8 or VHS camera. I don't even remember. Anyway, so we wrote this movie that was pretty much ripping off Scream. It was called Crimson Moon, and it was about a serial killer who took on a different movie killer persona with each cycle of the moon. So his first kill, he kills someone dressed as Michael Myers. He eventually moves on to Norman Bates from Psycho. I forget what the third one he does is, Hannibal Lecter or something, I don't know. And so yeah, we shot this movie, and my friends and I were supposed to play the two detectives trying to figure out the murders in the movie. We were 12, and so we actually drew goatees on our face with magic marker, and we weren't trying to be funny, we just thought that looked really cool. And I remember when we showed the movie to our parents, we did this kind of screening with all of our parents in the living room. As soon as we walked on camera with these smeared magic marker goatees, they just burst out laughing, and I remember it hurt my feelings. I was like, how could they do this? This is a serious piece of cinema we're making. And of course, in hindsight, it was ridiculous. And then we even ripped off Scream with one of the kills. We had my sister play a kind of Casey Becker character, and we had her get hung from a tree and disemboweled. But I think the way we did it was we just had her stand on a patio chair in the backyard and put like a rope behind her, but didn't actually tie it to her, just kind of hung. And then we just smeared her t-shirt with ketchup, and we just filmed from the knees up, so it didn't look like She was standing on a chair. It looked like she was suspended. And we just thought it was so cool. Really silly stuff, obviously. And of course, it's, in a way, we were kind of doing what a lot of movies after Scream did, was we were ripping it off and borrowing from it without actually building on it. And we were 12, so how were we actually going to do that? But we were trying to rip off this really smart movie and ended up making something really dumb. The kind of movie that Scream is kind of making fun of. Which, once again, that happened in real life with much bigger movies, I would argue. I know what you did last summer is a similar case where it had some of the same people who worked on Scream. And it was trying to ape Scream a little bit, but just wasn't quite as witty in how it was commenting on horror movies and what it means to be raised by horror movies, and how people who are obsessed with them might riff on those tropes and be inspired by them in really bad and cruel ways. Something else I admire about Scream just as a series is that I felt like it went on to be claimed by subsequent generations, which I think is pretty cool. The sequel comments on sequels. The third movie comments on trilogies. The fourth movie comments on reboots. I haven't seen the TV show. If you've seen the TV show, let me know if I should watch it in the comments. Let me know if it's worth it. But I know it's pretty recent, so I'm guessing it's more catering to Generation Z and maybe riffing on their relationship with horror movies. I don't know, I'll have to check it out. I think all of the seasons are on Netflix. Like I said, if you've seen it, let me know. Maybe I'll watch it. And I know they just, I think in the past couple weeks, confirmed that there's going to be a Scream 5. I know Courtney Cox has signed on for it. Maybe David Arquette has. I'm not sure. Oh, and we should talk about them real quick because I think Dewey and Gale Weathers are, I think they're one of the great scary movie screen couples. Starting in this first movie, I mean, Gale Weathers is a pretty horrible person, and Dewey is arguably the most noble character of the movie, even though he's kind of dopey. And to see them get together and to see them really grow to care about one another throughout the series is fantastic. The only problem is, if we do this fifth movie and they both come back, I feel like you can't kill either of them. They're such iconic characters of the franchise, but at the same time, if they're the only ones who sign on, where do you go? Like, who is your anchor? Where do you get the stakes? Because then the possibility of them getting harmed, I mean, that creates really, really high stakes for this movie. But at the same time, they've already toyed, especially with Dewey, they've toyed and teased Dewey dying in like every one of the Scream movies, so it might feel tired if they do that again. Who knows? I don't know what they're going to come up with, but I'll be excited to see it for sure. I also love Dewey's theme. It's like, it's hard to whisper instrumental themes, so I don't know how I'm gonna do that, especially, but it's kind of like it's like a barrel, boom, boom, barrel. It almost sounds like the Twin Peaks theme song or something. But I always thought that was the most memorable piece of music from the film, and just just really, really captures his character. So yeah, I'll be super excited if we get a Scream 5. I think they're actually supposed to start filming it kind of soon, so I guess they'll take certain safety measures and while they're filming it during COVID, and we'll see what happens with it. Going back to the references real quick, I just rewatched the movie. It's Sunday, by the way. This morning we recorded a 3.5 hour podcast episode about Jason Lives, which is the 6th Friday the 13th movie. That will be on Halloweenies, and then I rewatched Scream today. I knew I was going to do Scream, but I hadn't seen it in a few years, so I rewatched it. And then now I'm recording this. Side note, I think the plan will be to drop these every, let's say Monday. I would say Sunday night, but it takes a little bit to edit and get the levels right and all that stuff, so I'm going to record on Sunday, but drop on Monday. Anyway, getting sidetracked. I rewatched the movie, and I think for the most part it holds up really well. There's one reference point that is, it kind of bugged me, and I don't know if it only bugged me because I've seen it so many times by this point, but they reference Halloween, they reference Nightmare on Elm Street, they reference Friday the 13th, they referenced The Fog, Terror Train, When a Stranger Calls, all these different movies. I Spit on Your Grave, like all the characters, even the ones who supposedly don't know a lot about horror movies. They all know a lot about horror movies, even the ones who say they don't. And so Tatum, who is Neve Campbell's best friend, played by Rose McGowan, and they're all great in this movie. I think they just lean into their archetypes so well that really sets those archetypes up to be subverted and broken nicely. But anyway, Tatum makes several very specific scary movie references. I think she's the one who makes the reference to I Spit on Your Grave. But at one point in the movie, she references the killings, all the stuff that's going on in the town, and she says, "Oh, it's like something right out of a Wes Carpenter film," which is, of course, a combination of Wes Craven, who directed Scream, and John Carpenter, who directed Halloween and The Fog and The Thing and so many other great horror movies. Wes Craven directed many other great horror movies too. And it's a little sly reference, but it kind of doesn't make sense because they reference both Wes Craven and John Carpenter separately in the movie. Like, they talk about their movies. It's such a little thing, but it just kind of bugged me. It seemed like the sense of humor was not as consistent as it could have been, right? Like, you can't reference the real thing and then reference a composite that's a fake thing of two of the real things you referenced. I don't know, maybe I'm being a big nerd about this and I should just get over it, but it was like the one thing in the movie that really stuck in my craw a little bit. And then, of course, I feel like Jamie Kennedy as Randy and Matthew Lillard as Stu, one of the killers. They're both a little bit over the top, but it kind of works perfectly. With Matthew Lillard especially, I feel like by the end, for me, his over-the-top nature sort of plays into the psychosis he's experiencing. Like, he really does feel truly unhinged at the end. And Randy, I think, is the most extra character, and he's kind of a conduit for the horror geek audience, so I think he needs to be a little bit extra and over the top. So even though their performances were maybe a little bit more cartoonish than most of the other characters in the movie, it really didn't bother me. Once again, the movie is not going for realism, and it knows that. And then as such, it's actually able to make several realistic points about, once again, how we consume horror movies, how we get so obsessed with them. And in some ways, I feel like a lot of people who are horror movie nerds, they look at everything through that lens, whether it's comparing their own plight to whatever's going on in the movies, comparing the world state to what's going on in the movies, looking at the movies as metaphors. I mean, I formed a whole ASMR channel around horror movies, right? So it's just funny the way that we absorb different media, and I really do feel like Scream ties into that so nicely. I will say this. I think Scream 2 is maybe the better movie. I watched Scream 2 pretty recently, like a year ago, and I feel like it actually owns its extraness more than Scream 1 does. And I feel like it's actually aged a little bit better. They're both fantastic, but Scream 2 is really where the money's at for me, and we will definitely get an episode on that because Scream 2, I had a really formative experience seeing that film that I'll save for that episode, but we'll definitely get to it. And maybe once I do, I'll actually get that Ghostface figure back, and we can put it on the wall back there. That's all I have for this week. Thank you all so much again for watching, and once again, if there's a particular movie that you want me to talk about, please comment on it. If I like it, I'll do it. I promise. I actually fished out a bunch of horror action figures I have. I'm looking at a bunch of them over there, and maybe it'll be a movie that matches one of those, and I can put a little guy on the shelf behind me. So yeah, thank you again for watching. Most importantly, I really hope you're staying safe and healthy, And if you like horror movies, which if you're watching this channel, I'm assuming you do, I hope you're getting to watch a lot of those right now and finding as much comfort in them as I am. Also, feel free to reach out, not only in the comments but on social media. I've got a lot of not a lot, but I have spare time on my hands right now, like many of us, and I really love interacting with you all and just hearing what you're watching and working on, and what kind of movies you love. So don't be a stranger with all that, especially as I'm starting out and trying to build the audience and all that good stuff. Once again, I don't have a sign off yet. I know I've got that ring thing in the beginning, which I think works okay. That's a good opener, but I don't have an official sign off yet. But I will. I'll think of some kind of gesture or cool catchphrase or something like that I can do at the end of each show. But I don't have it now, so I'm just going to say thank you for watching again. Be safe, and have a good night. Bye-bye.